You're listening to the MAMIL Sports Cycling Podcast, bringing you the latest news from the world of cycling and the global MAMIL Sports community.
Okay, welcome back to the second MAMIL Sports podcast. We did one last month, which hopefully you've managed to have a listen to, and we're back now for the second, the November podcast. Obviously, the cycling season is over. Things have got a little bit quiet, but we're still here to give you some advice and have a general chat about the cycling scene. So I am joined again. My name's Tom, and I started MAMIL Sports, and I'm joined again by my two trusty MAMILs. We have Pete over in Geneva.
How are you doing, Tom? Pete? The world. Hope you're having a good November.
The world, yeah. We'll get there one day. I think there's my mum, your mum. I know my dad listened to it as well, so and my brother and my brother's wife. So
that counts for about 50% of the listeners. Okay.
Yeah. Okay, Pete, thanks for joining us again. And over in Northern Ireland, we've got Bryan. Just remind us what you do for a living and the company that you run, because it's quite relevant to the conversation.
Yeah, no bother. I am keeping not too bad. I've got a bit of a cold. Tried to start bike training this week, but cold's kind of a bit of man flu, so that sort of took me off a bit. But yeah, I'm a head coach at Mellow Velo Cycle Coaching, and full-time coach, working with guys, and yeah, it's great to be here and be able to sort of offer advice and a few tips and pointers to anyone that's interested. Especially today, we're going to be talking about power meters and heart rate and whether it's going to be a good thing for you and whatnot. So yeah, it's going not too bad.
Good stuff. All right. So what we're going to do in this podcast actually is have a chat, as Bryan has just said, about power meters and heart rate monitors and the benefits of maybe using them and having them as part of a more kind of structured training program. And the reason why we're doing that in November, obviously the cycling, kind of professional cycling scene is quite quiet at the moment, but you know, people are starting to think about Christmas, and maybe there's a gift under the tree that you're hoping to get, which will be a certain brand of fitness watch or heart rate monitor or power meter, which are very popular at the moment. I think we all use them actually, so we probably have a few good tips for you. And then kind of a bit of a news roundup as well, looking at a few things that have been happening in the professional cycling scene over the last couple of weeks. Yeah, firstly, guys, obviously it's been a couple of weeks since spoke to you both, but you know, what have you been up to in your kind of cycling and in your training? Pete, for example, we've got another Facebook group that we're a member of with a couple of other friends, and I see that you've been planning your 2018 calendar. So have you pretty much loaded up your cycling season next year now?
I've loaded up kind of some of the things I'm definitely considering. I haven't quite locked on what exactly I'm doing. So, I mean, for sure I'm going to do the Étape de Tour, and then highly likely I'm going to do a sportif actually in Italy in June in Dolomites, which is going to take in the Stelvio and the Motorola with our friend Dr. Stewart.
Oh yeah.
Stewart. So
Dr. Stewart, yeah.
I mean,
I think he weighs as much as one of my shins.
He is 6'2" and 68 kilos. He is a proper climber naturally. But yeah, it's people think you're a bit mad, you know, saying, oh my goodness, you're booking this stuff already 7 months out, 8 months out, but you've got to sort of get these things in the diary before they sell out and then start working your training backwards.
There's quite a few of them though.
Yeah.
Obviously the Stelvio, the Étape, the Marmot that you might do again, but there's a couple of mountain bike rides.
Yeah, I definitely won't do the Marmot because it's on the same day as the Étape, but the Marmot's been bought by Look actually, and they're expanding this Marmot brand, which sounds a bit weird because everyone thinks Marmot, they think of the event in France obviously with the Glibier and Alpe d'Huez and whatnot, but yeah, there's an additional one in August which is going to go into Valais in Switzerland, which I probably will do as well.
Bryan, what about you? You said, I actually feel your pain because I've been hanging around with my nephew, little 18-month-old kind of bag of enthusiasm at the moment, but he's like a walking germ, you know, so I've been off and on my turbo trainer and doing a couple of rides over the last few weeks, but I don't think I've ever been this ill. I've had flu, I think, every
I'm a bit
couple of days.
I was completely I've been off the bike really for the last 3 years, and
that's quite bad flu.
I haven't been doing a lot, and I was like, okay, I'll start back. And first day back was grand. I'd done a 45 minutes, just fasted in the morning, and then the next day I was sick. But I think that came about just from, you know, not looking after myself, not looking after nutrition and stuff like that, not good enough sleep. So I don't think another week off's not going to make a massive difference after 3 years. So we'll take it as it comes and see how we go tomorrow.
I'm doing some cycling, obviously getting back into it, but Pete sounds as though he's keeping his fitness up.
Enthusiastic as ever.
I'm a little bit sick as well. Say that rather than last time, which was a relative slosh fest of beers, I'm drinking tea and honey with lemon. But and also this is old man stuff. Getting sick hurt my back, a trapped nerve in my back, so I actually haven't ridden outdoors this week. I've done all my training this week on Zwift, 4 rides this week, which is a first. The outdoors doesn't even exist anymore. It's all virtual now.
I went to Tobago. I popped to Tobago, kind of as you do, a couple of weeks ago for a week. I had free accommodation then, and I found a cheap flight, so I just went over and took my bike. But it's probably not the best part of the world to take a carbon road bike. Probably best with a.
And why the road's terrible surface?
Yeah, I mean it was getting smashed by kind of rains as well. It's rained a lot over there, but I wouldn't necessarily say they look after the roads probably as much as I'd like them to. It's definitely not Mallorca, which was a thought going through my mind as I was changing my kind of third puncture. Yeah, some beautiful scenery. So I wouldn't necessarily recommend taking a bike there, but if you're in that part of the world, definitely do check it out. There is actually quite a big cycling scene in the Caribbean, but obviously in Europe we've got Mallorca and the Alps and the Pyrenees on our doorstep, which I'd probably say I'd go to first, to be honest. Anyway, so good stuff. Well, good to get a bit of a roundup of what you guys have been up to. Obviously, it's kind of deepest, darkest winter in the Northern Hemisphere now, so we'll keep ticking over and hopefully can get some fitness anyway over the next couple of months. But Pete, got a bit of a news roundup because there has been one or two things that have been happening over the last couple of weeks.
Yeah, one or two. We're definitely now in the deepest, darkest part of the off season, in which news is hard to come by. I'm going to call this the first piece of off-season fake news. To the credit, some of the clickbait websites have gotten the feedback, particularly from me, saying, okay, I know it's the off-season, but not another story about disc brakes or Lance Armstrong. So they've had to come up with something new.
And I've seen you as well, Pete. You do love a comment on the website.
Just honestly, that's what annoyed me. I think all last year it was basically rehashing stories about disc brakes and Lance Armstrong. So going, guys, I know it's the off season, but try harder. This time I think they've tried too hard, and this whole spat with Phil Gaiman, who some of you might not know. He rode for Garmin, I think they were last called whenever he finished his career. American guy, retired.
I think he retired in 2016 at the age of 31, actually.
31. But he's kept quite a reasonable profile through Strava, and he's been going out and bagging lots of segments and everything else, and he's actually quite a good writer, and he's quite funny, and it's his writing that's got him into a bit of trouble this time, because he's come out with a book called Draft Animals, which I haven't read it myself, but from all accounts it's him basically talking about what happens whenever you go after your dreams, like he did, which is effectively he wanted to be a professional cyclist, put all his heart and soul and dreams into it, became a professional cyclist, but at the end of the day just wasn't good enough, even in his own words, to be at that top level, and that's why he ended up retiring at an early age. But in that book, something's been picked up on in the news, and I would say made into a story during these quiet times, where he brought up the question about the motor doping, and his point of view is they're doing all the tests, the UCI are doing the tests on bikes and everything else, but actually he believes that this is something which was going on years ago, and they're only reacting to it now. And one of the comments that was made was about the whole Cancellara incident in Flanders, which has been well documented. It was even in a documentary in Belgium. And if you do watch the footage, it does look like he's on the drops. He presses something, which I'm pretty sure because Fabian famously didn't ride Di2. He always rode mechanical, so he pressed something on his handlebars, what looks like allegedly. And then he took off like a rocket, and that was brought up. But within a big book, this was just one thing which he raised, and during an extremely tired, boring time of the cycling year, all these clickbait websites brought it up and created a story out of effectively nothing. So much to the point where Cancellara had the lawyers involved with a cease and desist order. I think they were trying to get to stop shipping the book, actually.
Yeah, they were trying to get the book taken off the shelves. And actually, I think Phil Gaiman was, he released a statement via Twitter saying that he was merely kind of regurgitating or reciting information that was in the public arena as an allegation or a.
No, it was, and it was. I mean, there was an actual documentary made about it in Belgium. It was a televised documentary. So I think in this instance, this is just a complete case of fake news. You know, these clickbait websites pick something and made it huge, whenever actually it wasn't really a real story.
But I think it's been and gone. It's come and gone quite quickly, that story. And actually, it's funny you should mention him actually, Pete, because I actually downloaded one of his previous books as an audio book. Because I'm quite lazy like that when I was flying to Tobago, and I managed to get through a decent chunk of it. And it's Pro Cycling on $10 a day. I don't know if you've heard of that by Phil Gaiman, but it's actually a really interesting insight into just how hard it is to sustain yourself as a kind of an amateur or I guess an averagely good or even above averagely good.
Exactly. If you're a Sagan or something like that, life's sweet. You've got a multi-million-pound contract and nothing to worry about. But if you're one of these many guys are just on the periphery fighting for a spot all the time, it's a very tough life.
Yeah, really tough. I mean, you've got to give him a huge amount of respect. The amount of driving all over the US that he did to compete. He was paid very little. He was looking after his own nutrition and existing on, I don't know, equivalent is over there, but pot noodles or very very basic food because he couldn't afford anything. So I'm kind of pleased that his book seems to be doing quite well, and obviously he's kind of raised his profile with I think he's got his own YouTube channel called Worst Retirement Ever, where he goes after questionable Strava segments, shall we say, where he's alleging that the pros that bagged those Strava segments previously might have been dope. I think that's his kind of thinking, but seems to be having quite an interesting retirement, and kind of an interesting guy. So I may or may not read his book Draft Animals. I'm not sure. But, anyway, I think Cancellara invited him to go to one of his races next season to try and beat him. As yet, I don't think Phil has said where he's going to go.
This thing called chasing Cancellara.
That seems to have blown over. What else has been going on?
While this no news has been going on, there's been some real news going on, which has been, in my view, not properly addressed in the Times newspaper, of which I'm a subscriber, so it disappoints me a little bit. But this is the UCAD findings of the Sky British Cycling What's in the Jiffy Bag story, the Jiffy Gate, in which there were allegations, of Wiggins being one of them, taking corticosteroids with TUEs. So I guess technically within the letter of the law, but not within the spirit of it. And the issue, of course, with the Jiffy Bag was that if that had a corticosteroid in it and he was taking that was actually slightly outside of the period of which he had a TUE, and therefore it would have been a doping violation. And that's why it's so controversial. Obviously everyone's heard all the mess of the way in which the story was managed, with people saying, it wasn't for Wiggins, or somebody was going to visit somebody else that wasn't even in France at the time, or what was in it was Flumasil, which is something which they had no records of having bought in the UK, and it's something which you can get over the counter anyway in France. And
it's all I think you mentioned it, we kind of touched on it in the last podcast as well, but it's, I think, murky and just leaves a bad taste in everyone's. There's so many kind of unanswered questions, isn't there?
To be honest with you, there's a BBC documentary starting, I think, in 5 minutes' time. So by the time we come off this podcast, there could have been some bombshells dropped and some new news. Certainly, there have been some comments by Shane Sutton, who's now a coach in China of all places.
Yeah, so he's gone to China. I think he said that using a TUE obviously may have provided a competitive advantage, but it was within the rules. I think that's kind of what he was saying. So taking things to the margins, if you like, of what is sportsmanship.
And Miller, what David Miller that is. I mean, his comment was that he thought they were obviously gaming the system.
That's right. So from David Miller.
I know, coming from David Miller. Well, actually, what I know David Miller's. Not everyone's cup of tea. His comment was, given that Sky had set
David
out
Miller
to be, this kind of whiter
David
than
Miller
white.
was he was a doper.
Set up,
proven or whatever, but I'm not a fan of Bradley Wiggins. He's a good bike rider and all. He's won the Tour de France, but I think this is kind of tarred him a bit. There was probably something involved in it that we're not going to find out, but that coming from Miller is probably
well, the thing for me, I mean, obviously we'll never know, and I hope that really it boils down to bad admin, but the lack of records being kept, and obviously Richard Freeman's computer allegedly being stolen. But even so, if you just purely strip it back to incompetence and bad record keeping, even that is, I mean, obviously it doesn't, it changes the nature of the debate, but even that's still quite disappointing, because I think I read in an article they've got receipts for meals that were bought, hotel receipts, travel receipts. Richard Freeman apparently was unable to use a Dropbox, so that's why the records weren't on there. I mean, it's been dropped by UCAD. It's discredited UCAD. Wiggins and Team Sky have come out, very defensive, almost kind of saying that they've been exonerated.
They haven't been exonerated, they just haven't been found guilty. It's not really the same thing. And the reason why they haven't been found guilty, because all UCAD come up and said was there were no records kept, therefore we've reached a dead end, and that's the end of it, which is extremely strange, as you say. If an organization is Team Sky, who are so professional, I'm sure they've got records and expenses for buying a croissant here and a coffee there. But whenever it comes to a controlled substance, they've no records of it. I mean, even at the track, and this may not even be related, but I mean, there's apparently there was testosterone patches delivered, but that was an accident.
Anyway, this is a very, very polarizing kind of topic, isn't it? But obviously, it needs to be discussed. But this really splits the cycling community down the middle. There's 50% of people just want to forget about it and just think it's a mountain out of a molehill. Another 50% of the cycling community think there's some really serious kind of unanswered questions. I think that UCAD have been really discredited. I know that they're also in a bit of trouble with Tyson Fury and the boxing kind of claim that he might have for compensation against them. So they're not in a good place themselves either. And obviously, I think after, the inquiry and the parliamentary select committee and Bradley Wiggins asking how much taxpayers' money has been spent on this, we're left really with it being referred to the General Medical Council. Dr. Richard Freeman's kind of persona non grata, it seems, at British cycling now as well. So, and then Shane Sutton said the other day, I think it might have been today or yesterday, that he now considers British cycling, I don't know what term he exactly used, but it's basically lacking direction and doesn't really have good leadership at the moment. But I guess we'll see. I mean, we didn't do too bad recently at the Worlds.
I don't think this is the end of the story. I don't think the Russians will let this go, frankly. And then the final thing in the news this week, and this just shows you how whenever this is within the top 3 stories in the news, what a quiet time of year it is. Zwift, the online virtual cycling platform, has increased its prices by 62%. Now, this isn't to do with Brexit, apparently. Not again. This is just to do with the fact that they have so many people on Zwift now. I've been a member of Zwift since it was a beta back in whenever it was 14, 15. And I can remember at the beginning and even a couple of years ago, I mean, the number of people on Zwift, you could go, it was like, being in a ride, you saw the old person, you give them a wave, a thumbs up. And now I'm just getting passed by pelotons of about 1,000. a thousand riders at once. It's just getting insane. So
I'm probably one of those, Pete, but I normally, I would only ever stand a chance of passing you on a bike in the virtual world these days, to be honest.
I was passed this evening. I did a decent ride this evening on Zwift, and so I was passed by a peloton, which was coming down a mountain, looked very cool, and it was like something like a Strada Bianchi because of all the dust they were kicking up, and it was just like 1,000 cyclists. So anyways, Zwift has decided to put up their prices by 62%. Now, if you're someone like me who's had Zwift for a very long time, because you're one of the members, in quote, that got us where they are today, your price won't increase till to November 2018, so I've got nothing to worry about. But for newbies, you're going to get hit with a 62% price increase. The question is,
But I mean, I know there's been quite a lot of, again, this is something that's split the cycling community or the virtual cycling community down the middle as well. But, it has kind of revolutionized indoor training, if you like. Other training providers, platforms are available, of course.
But are they? That's the question. Are they? Can you name one? Because I can't think of who their competition is.
Well, I mean, what they offer is so unique.
Exactly.
But, if you wanted to get on a turbo and do, if you had the mindset to be able to do it, I mean, it wouldn't probably be as entertaining. But you could use Trainer Road, for example.
Oh yeah, but I mean, in terms of, I honestly can't think of anything else in sport or training which has taken this gaming virtual aspect to this level. Not any other sport. I think within cycling, kind of like,
You
at
can
the
race
forefront of
against like
something.
professionals and all, can't you?
Actually,
You can.
with this
It's
one.
Yeah.
it's opened up a new dynamic. One
I
of the
think
guys I coached
they've had a
there,
couple.
he was on the Zwift program where you get through to the semi-final, where you could get a contract with one of the pro teams, Dimension Data, I think it was.
That was
Yeah, yeah.
that was
Yeah,
the
coaching
academy.
him,
Yeah, that
and
was just on
he got
recently.
through to the
So
semi-finals.
you were
Ollie
teaching him,
Peckover
Bryan,
from
were
England,
you were
and on the
coaching him?
semi-finals, he gets sent Tax Neo, I think it's called, and they went and done the tests, and their sessions were set. But it brought that a lot. Say even British Cycling has done like performance testing and talent ID. It's kind of brought talent ID right into your living room, essentially, which is amazing. That I'm really into that. But Zwift's fantastic if it's used properly. But for a lot of guys that are maybe looking to race and train and progress, it's maybe not great for people coming into cycling that are a bit bored doing turbo training or whatnot. Then it's a fantastic tool, but it can distract you from training essentially, as opposed to just riding around on an island.
Me personally, that to me, they're here to stay, and in the cold British winter, I know there's some people out there that just get out there and do a ride anyway. But if you've had like, I don't know, 10-hour day at work or whatever, and you get the tube home, and you basically just have an hour before you collapse into bed, you can jump on the turbo and still enjoy it, and ride with over 100 other people in an event or whatever. It is quite good. So I know that I'll continue using it anyway. It actually brings them in $500,000 more revenue a month when the price increase kicks in. So just before we go into the next section, we're going to talk about power meters and heart rate monitors, because a lot of people, as I said at the beginning, might be thinking about getting their first heart rate monitor or power meter for Christmas as a gift. But I just want to say a big well done to our MAMIL of the month this month, a guy called Rob Petrie, who is 37 and lives up in the Midlands. So he used to be a fairly good kind of semi-professional, almost professional football player. I think he was on the books of Brighton for a while, but a couple of knee injuries, and then I think he had at least 2 knee operations as well, basically put pay to his football career. So he had a couple of years of milling around and not doing much, and then picked up a bike and just really, really loves it. And I actually met him. I know we have MAMILs of the month from all over the world as well. And if you want to be a MAMIL of the month, or if you know somebody who you'd like to nominate, then you can email us at mamil@mamilsports.com, or through the Facebook page or whatever. But I went up to the MAMIL Sports Midlands rides that got quite popular last year, and had a ride with Rob, and he's a really nice guy and just loves his cycling, and rides with a kind of tongue-in-cheek cycling club up in the Midlands called Bread and Bitter. I don't know if you've heard of them. They enjoy their riding and they enjoy their bitter, so that sounds good to me. Anyway, well done, Rob.
You're listening to the MAMIL Sports Cycling Podcast. Our global community is active over all social media, and you can keep up to date with the latest news, features, tech, reviews and interviews on our website, www.mamilsports.com, and by subscribing to our podcast. We'd love to hear from you and share your cycling adventures and achievements with the community, no matter how big or small. If you'd like to be featured as our MAMIL of the month, or have an interesting story to share, then get in touch. You can contact us through our website, Facebook, or email mamil@mamilsports.com. We look forward to hearing from you. Ride safe.
Christmas is coming. We might do something special for the Christmas edition of the podcast. I'm not sure what yet, but there's a lots of gadgets out there that MAMILs love to use, and one that's particularly popular, certainly over the last kind of 12 to 24 months, is the power meter. Obviously, the heart rate monitor has been around for a while. Used to use a heart rate monitor personally myself, and then also got a power meter, and now use them both together. I could probably do with being a bit more structured, but just really enjoy the data. And certainly when you're on these kind of online training platforms like Zwift, for example, power is very useful to look at as well. But our 2 experts here, Pete and Bryan, been using them properly for a while. So guys, I mean, anyone out there that's thinking about getting involved for the first time and maybe asking Santa Claus for either a heart rate monitor or a power meter, what are your thoughts and what are your tips?
I think first question I would ask is, why do you want one?
So it's a great way to test, see where you're at, and then maybe in sort of 2 to 3 months progress to, if at all. And definitely that's something you can do with power, which you can't really do with heart rate, because your heart rate zones essentially stay the same. Like they can change, but that's getting a wee bit more technical and bringing in other forms of testing to really identify that. But definitely the power meter is literally maybe week on week or month on month, see your progression or see how you're developing throughout the season. How do you think it's helped you along the way, Pete?
So I've had a power meter now for about 3-4 years. The reason why I wanted to get one was because I'd moved over to Switzerland and had got into my first year of cycling and sort of training. And training for me had been fairly unstructured. It had been it's kind of Eddie Merckx training, which was just ride your bike. Which didn't do me any harm at all, because I would go out on long rides and I would go out and then just climb the mountains, and probably going too hard too often and not really able to track progress, other than sort of use Strava segments as kind of a benchmark. If I was going faster, I assume it was improving. And then because I enjoyed it so much the first year, I decided to start being coached. And one of the prerequisites of that, the coach would say, you got to have a power meter. I'll be coaching you remotely. I need to have this data, and and I think it goes back to one of the things which a power meter can help you do, which is first you have to be committed to being disciplined and organized in your training.
Yeah, very good.
If you're not going to be disciplined and and organized, a power meter just records the watts; it doesn't create the watts. So that's the first thing. What it allowed me to do was to really ensure that I was training at the right level in terms of effort, and then to understand whether that amount of training was actually returning the gains. And as you said at the start, if the analogy I think of it as kind of like life lifting weights, which is, you go in, you do your 3 sets of whatever weight, you write down what you did, and then, you'd log what you did the next week. And over time, you'd understand whether you're adding more kilos and therefore getting stronger.
And you really saw that benefit with a power meter?
Yeah, because you were able to, train at the right level, because the right level for training isn't hard all the time, right? First you've got to calibrate where you are in terms of doing an FTP test.
One test I would use, it's an aerobic test. So you do 2 things at the one time, and what you want to test is your VO2 max, and then your 20-minute power is essentially how you can theoretically work out your FTP. So what I would do, and it scares people quite a lot, because you're asking them to do a 6-minute max test with maybe 14 minutes easy in between, and then the 20-minute test. But when you do this format, you get 2 test results, and even the difference between the 2, if you have an experienced coach, they'll be able to actually look at, if your 6-minute was good but your 20-minute was bad, it could mean that your actual strength endurance isn't quite there. But if you're just starting out and you want to have an idea of where you're at, doing a 20-minute test is it's very important. It's how you can sort of get your training zones sorted out. I'd say to guys, it's all about power up, weight down, and it is that simple. If you want to affect that equation, you either put your power up or you get your weight down. The weight is probably in theory the easier one to lower, but what a lot of people will try chase is the power increase. That's actually a lot more difficult to come around. You can lose a kilo a lot easier than you can put on 5 watts. So roughly speaking, 5 kilos is worth, maybe 25 watts on a long climb. Oh yeah, easily. That's roughly like the go-to measurement. So for guys riding the likes of tape to tour, you've got long climbs in there,
Really?
and the likes of you guys doing a tape, it's over 6 hours. So if you actually look at the likes of an FTP test and setting your threshold, it's not that specific to the event you're doing. Yes, you're climbing hills that are maybe 20, 40 minutes, maybe even an hour long, but there's a lot more to it than that. What a lot of guys do is start thrashing out FTP. Your FTP essentially is what you can do for 1 hour. That's it. And that's on a good day when you're fully motivated, fully carbed up, that's what it is. But the events you're trying to do or, training for last 6 hours. So it doesn't really correspond into that. So what a lot of guys and what a lot of the online training, likes of Zwift and a lot of the other places are promoting, is this high intensity training program. Now, for me and the guys I coach who are doing maybe at the most, maybe 4 or 5 hour races at the most, we work a lot of the time in the lower end. So that'll be like zone 1, zone 2.
I'm glad you mentioned that, actually, because this
Yeah.
is something that I need to do. You know, I've done my FTP. I know my current watts per kilo. You know, I'm enjoying riding in a peloton, if you like, on these virtual rides with people that are in a similar kind of watts per kilo that I am. But I guess the real benefit of a structured training program over the off season or whatever is being able to split your rides up into these different zones.
If you have about 10 hours a week to train, 7 to 8 hours of that should be in zone 2. Now that's your endurance zone. You're probably talking, it's your, like, if you're working off rate of perceived exertion, it's about 2 to 3.
Which is endurance zone.
Threshold heart rate, you're probably talking about 69 to 83%, or threshold power. Depending on how fit you are, like, it can go from 65 to 75%. But say, for example, if you notice your zone 2's at the lower end of that range, you want to drive it right up to the top end of that range before you start doing any harder training. So if you're riding around in like a zone 2 power level, and it's only 60% of your threshold, you're very like under-trained in that particular energy system. So you'll want to work in that more. Now, the thing is, to try sell something like that, if you're trying to sell something to a lot of people and say, look, you need to ride 7 hours at 140 heart rate, it doesn't really sell very well. But if you want to hammer people into the ground, it's a lot easier to make that appealing. And there's been a lot of high intensity training programs, whether that's in the gym or insanity training or CrossFit, with all other things. So the thing is, you guys and a lot of our listeners will be knocking their pan in left, right, and center. If you do hit the knock or bunk or whatnot, that's a very good indicator that you're not sort of processing energy very well. So what I would do with a lot of the guys I work with is run them on fasted sessions. So, getting up in the morning and training fasted without any food, or say if they come home from work, it would be ride the bike first and then eat after. Say for like the normal guy starting out, you do about, say, half an hour, 45 minutes fasted in the morning with nothing. And then after that, you bring on your breakfast or whatever. If you can't train in the morning, what you're really looking to do is train without an energy substrate, whether that be carbohydrate or fat or protein or whatever, going around the bloodstream. So you want to if you imagine your muscles to have like energy in them, and as you ride, that's depleted. What we want to do is actually have a depleted muscle or depleted energy levels while we train, and then fill that back up afterwards. And that just means that, seeing these 6 hour rides, it means that your body's able to utilize the energy you have, as opposed to the energy that's in the bottle on your bike, because you can't, you'll see, like, it happened. Richard, was it a couple of years, maybe 3 years ago, in a tape to tour, he was majorly dehydrated and had to get oxygen and stuff at the top one of the climbs.
Oh, yeah.
Even a lean guy, when you say fat, a lot of people think, a fat guy, but even a lean guy, 10% body fat is some ridiculous amount of, calories available to him, something like 20,000 or something like that. So, it's something that, for anyone listening to this podcast looking to do an endurance event, you need to work out predominantly in the lower end zones to increase that metabolic efficiency. And once you do that and you actually stick to it, you'll then, whenever you bring in the high intensity training program, you'll be able to just reap the benefits.
So just bringing it back to, let me just paint a picture. For example, Pete's around the tree with his wife and his 2 kids, and they're having a lovely day. Pete's done the cooking because he's a really nice guy. Mrs. Pete says, "Pete, I love you. You've been a very, loving husband this year. I've bought you a present," and it is a power meter. So what's the first thing that Pete will do in terms of training and using that power meter when he gets the time to do so? Would it be, immediately do an FTP and then have a look at his zones?
There's no point in doing an FTP test if you're unfit. So if you're unfit, you'll do one, and in a couple of weeks of actual training, them numbers will be irrelevant, essentially. Yeah. So when you get your power meter, it's about going out and actually getting used to the feel of it. And I've heard a lot of people say that they only ride to power, but you need to be able to ride to power along with heart rate, and do not forget your rate of perceived exertion. It's really, really important whenever you're, especially when you're racing or doing time trials or doing efforts up a climb, because the likes of Pete or yourself there doing these Tape de Tour and all this here, or Marmot, you may have an FTP figure of X, Y, and Z, but when you're 5 hours into one of these events, your FTP figure goes clean out the window. You may think you can do 300 watts for 20 minutes, which will sort of break down into maybe 260, 280 for a 40-minute climb, but if you're slightly dehydrated or whatever's happening, you need to have an understanding of your heart rate. And then you also need to have an understanding of your rate of perceived exertion. So you could maybe be 25, 40 watts down, but it feels like you're doing what it would have been maybe 3 months earlier or whatever on your FTP test. So they're all very important. I've read a load of studies and looked at, whatnot, and essentially any long endurance interval, heart rate's perfect. As long, it's nearly good actually having an understanding of power, and then you can nearly use it for like a month and then not need it again for a year or two, because you can understand how the power comes up. A lot of people, when you're riding heart rate, they ride far too hard early on in the interval, say like a 20-minute sweet spot interval, for example. They ride far too hard, then too easy, then they kind of level off, and then the interval's over. Power gives you the ability to, if you have an interval segment at say 280 watts, you literally go straight to that number, hold it, and then drop off again. Heart rate, you've obviously got the lag, and it's one thing that a lot of people have to get into their head when they're using a power meter is when you look at that number on your Garmin or whatever product you have,
you're always
get
chasing it
a
up.
feeling of the tension in your leg. That tension, the number will be going up and down or whatever, and that's the tension you need to get used to holding. The guys that I coach that really progress very, very well are the ones that can hold. They could hold maybe, if the range was 200 to 220, they'll hold it in that range the whole time. I see it far too often where people are apparently doing a whatever ride, zone 2 ride, but they range from maybe 150 to 290, and they're not in a small enough area to be able to get a real hone in on that zone and stress that particular energy system. So if you're using a power meter, you can do that if you actually do that. And I think on Zwift they have like training sessions, and on Trainer Road there's a very good reason why it comes in blocks, and that's how your training should look. It should look very blocky, and if you do that, you'll progress very well, as long as you build in periodization along with that.
And not to put people off getting a power meter, but if all this sounded a little bit complicated, it is because it kind of is. And like I don't have a coach anymore. One, because I'm sort of trying to save money and I'm not quite as mental about it as I used to be. But two, because after being coached for a few years, 3 years, I'm using a different program. There are other websites, but I'm using one called Today's Plan, which I actually think is really, really good. I've built a plan myself out of that, and looking back to what I was doing in previous years, it looks roughly the same. I can kind of interpret the data enough, not to an expert level, but I can understand it enough that I'm comfortable to do it myself. But honestly, if I was just starting out, we're living in the age of big data, but not big insight, if you know what I mean.
You get a lot of guys that have a really bad diet, and they're eating a lot of carbohydrate, they're eating a lot of sugar, and especially with newcomers into the sport, they're knocking gels back, they're taking a whole load of sports drinks. But what we really want to do in an endurance sport is train the body to utilize your own fat reserves. So you can have an occasion where someone is increasing their power at the low end, but they're fueling that with carbohydrate. And you can have another guy who is literally exactly the same body weight, watts per kilo threshold, but he fuels that on fat from his own, sources of fat in his tissue. The guy who's able to actually utilize his own fat as fuel will hands down beat the other guy every day, left, right, and center. It's that. Now this is like probably one of the. It's like everyone's always looking for the golden ticket, the secret to cycling or whatever. That's pretty much it. And another one, which is the secret to cycling and progression, is if you're going out and you're just hammering yourself up and down, you're hitting wee hills, and you're not really doing anything progressive, you're not stressing a particular energy system in any way, what you actually get from that training session is sore legs, and that's it. Whereas what we want to get is, of course, we're going to get sore legs, but we want to get a training stimulus from that. The way you can kind of look at it is if you're riding low end, you want to fuel that training session on either nothing or protein. That's a very advanced approach, which I've started doing with a lot of guys. And if you're doing the top end stuff, you want to fuel that on carbohydrate. And if you can polarize them two things, you're gonna quite literally transform your training. And I would say to anyone, if you're working off 10 hours a week, you can break it down into 70% of your training should be zone 2 or less. Say zone 2, maybe even 10% of that to 20% zone 3, and then the rest is sort of sprints or depending on your phase of training. But at this time of the year, that would be the breakdown I go for. And initially you will feel as if you're not doing anything, but then you'll be like, wow, I've just put 2 miles an hour on my sort of average speed.
Yeah. So would you say, I guess in summary then, that you know, it's very tempting to buy all this, shiny, expensive kit, to have a power meter because it's a new piece of data, and obviously it's something new to look at on your bike computer.
The thing is, what a lot of people think about coaching is that it's just a training plan, but it's actually a lot more than that. Whether it's teaching you how to descend, what gear ratio to have, the technical stuff of your bike, racing, tactics, awareness. So if you have the extra money, power meter is amazing. It makes my life a lot easier, and it makes us be able to really highlight and specific intervals in racing. But if you're a guy coming into something, you don't have a lot of money and you maybe have a grand spare, you're better spending that. It's taken me maybe 7 years to gain this amount of knowledge. So if you can buy that, it's going to fast track your sort of progression to where you want to be a lot quicker than just a power meter without any advice. That's how I would look at it. And I didn't have a power meter when I started, and then it just made, the price came down a bit and it just made sense. But definitely you'll get a lot more. I learned very quickly that when I got into cycling, I decided I wanted to try be a pro or whatever. It didn't quite work out, but I looked at who knew the most and I went to them and I paid the money, and then I fast track my progression essentially. And that'll work for anyone at any level. And there's a lot of inexperienced people out there, and probably with the growth of cycling clubs and the growth of cycling, you actually have a lot of inexperienced people offering inexperienced advice. You kind of have to watch who you take your advice from, but yeah, that's what I would do.
So if you're lucky enough to get a power meter or a heart rate monitor, it's probably important to have some sort of strategy after you've put it on your bike. Basically,
you have to have a certain love for it, and if you can lose that very quickly with a power meter, you can get so sort of engulfed in the numbers and wanting to be better that you forget actually what you got into cycling for, and it was that kind of community atmosphere, getting out with people and feeling that connection on a bike ride and a bit of slagging. Once you use power, you realise that, hold on a minute, I need a weekend ride and a cup of coffee with a wee of lads. Pete's a bit quiet now. He wants a new coach.
The MAMILS and the maidens. Yeah. So Pete, any final thoughts for us about your experience generally with power? I mean, obviously you've taken your cycling pretty seriously over the last couple of years.
I can't afford you. That's the problem. I can't afford the best. Whenever I was living in Switzerland, I had a power meter, great training conditions. I was using it all the time, and I was profit from it. Remember, we moved back to London for that year. I had the power meter on the bike, riding around Richmond Park, and honestly, I might as well have just written on a sticker 300 watts or 200 watts, stuck it over the top of my Garmin and said, look here, there you go, I've got a power meter. Isn't that wonderful? Because I wasn't able to use it. I didn't have the conditions to be able to use it, and I wasn't really focused on using it either. So it's like this. I mean, cycling's a sport now.
You still had a decent season though, didn't you? I mean, because I used to ride with you in the Surrey Hills, and that was
the strength I had was the hangover of that 2015 year, which we did the Hotrit, and then I was just leaving the system. Yeah, because I came back and I was doing 15-16 minute laps of Richmond Park, and then after that, I sort of died down. But the point with cycling cycling is, and one of the reasons why we love it as well, of course, is because we all like gadgets and we all like spending some money on ourselves. And there's no end of stuff you can buy, but at the end of the day, it won't do anything for you. It's like this. The way I think of it is like this, right?
Well, yeah.
It's like you can have a power meter can be like an accountant, in which it'll tell you how much you have, or how poor you are, how weak you are, or how strong you are, whatever. But that's it. Or you can have effectively a different strategy, which is to have almost like a wealth manager who could be your coach, who takes what you have and grows what you have. But if you haven't got that commitment and then someone to advise you or some way to actually get the most of that data, then you won't actually reach any kind of goal. It'll just be another shiny thing in your bike and you go, look, I've got a power meter.
Well, I think guys, we covered the kind of powered meter debate and subject quite well there, actually. And I think I've got a lot to take away from that, in that I basically just need to start taking the shiny gadgets on my bike a lot more seriously, and probably set up my training zones and have a word with Bryan. All right, guys. Well, thanks very much for that. That's the second MAMIL Sports podcast out the way, and I think there's been some very useful hints, tips, and discussions around data, the mighty watt, and obviously the heart rate monitor as well. And should probably give a few people food for thought about whether it's something that deserves a place under their Christmas tree. But if you're listening and you're out there and you do want one, enjoy it. And the main thing is to enjoy cycling. Any final thoughts, guys, for the listeners before we close off the podcast for November?
I would say that things are always darkest before the dawn. This is the depth of winter we're getting into now. Keep your training up. Don't destroy yourselves too much over Christmas.
Yeah, just watch those calories and beers coming up for the Christmas parties, and try not to offend too many people.
Good stuff. All right, guys, thanks very much. All you guys out there, mammals and maidens, thanks so much for listening in. If there's anybody that you know that you'd like to nominate as Mammal of the Month, or if there's anybody that we could maybe give a Christmas shout out to in the Christmas special of our podcast, please do get in contact with me at mamil@mamilsports.com. My name's Tom, or you can get in contact with us via the Facebook page. Thank you very much for tuning in and listening, and we shall see you in the December edition of the MAMIL Sports podcast, where we have an extra special guest. Thanks very much. Ride safe.